Welcome. You're listening to the Renegade River Show, and my name is Mike Hewitt. And today we've got Jim Riley in the studio with us.
Back again, dude. Good afternoon to all.
There, I couldn't hear myself for a minute, even with these fancy headphones on.
Well, there we go.
It was terrible.
It's not the smile, it's the dial.
There you go. And with us is Nick Sundquist, who is a candidate, primary challenging Republican candidate in the 34th State Senate District. Welcome back, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me again. I sure do appreciate it.
Nick, the reason that I wanted to bring you back today, not to beleaguer it, but just to get your feeling or thoughts on the topic of the fellow that you're challenging's vote in the Medicaid explosion. And the reason I'm asking you rather than him, to be quite candid with you, is I've left him a message. He's not calling me back. Evidently, he doesn't want to talk about it on the show. And so that causes me to say, Nick, what do you think, and how would you have voted, and what do you think it means to Michigan to roll out the red carpet for Obamacare?
It really is hard to know where to start. There's an awful lot to say on the subject. I would like to be able to say that Mr. Hansen's vote is disgraceful as a Republican, but he was fully expected to vote that way anyway. I certainly wouldn't have voted to expand Medicaid or introduce Obamacare and foist this awful legislation on Michigan citizens. A better alternative would be to follow the example of Oklahoma, where they're suing the federal government to eliminate the employer mandate that's associated with Obamacare. The Medicaid expansion isn't going to result in improved health outcomes. It's only going to result in more expensive medicine. The history of Medicare and Medicaid all across the country is the reason why we have such high insurance premiums today. The idea that this is somehow going to mitigate that is preposterous. It's a silly idea. They've estimated that 470,000 Michigan residents will enroll. The history of Arizona and Maine should be a good indication that we could expect about 4 times that number. This is going to devastate insurance markets in the state, and it's not going to result in better health outcomes. A recent study from Oregon, I believe that you can find the article at the Mackinac Center under issues. It's very high on the list under the healthcare tab. Will tell you that the Medicaid users show up in emergency rooms more frequently than people with insurance and people without insurance.
And it's not necessarily because they're more ill. It's because they're using those emergency rooms as their family clinic, their family doctor. They just mosey on in because it's free, right?
Yeah, and again, the health outcomes aren't any better than than with people without insurance altogether. If I could say one thing, a dear friend of mine passed away recently from cancer. And he made some bad personal decisions and bad business decisions, and found himself indigent, basically. He finally had to move in with his father and found himself on Medicaid. I firmly believe that he would have been treated much, much better if he had if a charity hospital had been available to him, and a charity hospital would have been available to him if we didn't have to pay the taxes that support the government bureaucrats that run these government programs.
Can I just ask a question that's got me a little confused? And I have not read the 20-some thousand pages of Obamacare, nor have I read the specifics, nor would I understand, I'm sure, if I had read the specifics of this big expansion here in Michigan. But am I correct in assuming that this 400 to 600,000 new folks who will be going from whatever plans that they had before to now having free, quote, free health care, but would they not be covered next month in October under Obamacare if the state did nothing? Would they not be under the same rules, requirements, payments, and everything else?
Yeah, no, Jim, they wouldn't. And the reason that O. Snyder, as I've come to affectionately call him, the reason that O. Snyder backed and pushed the Affordable Health Care Act of Mr. Obama's is exactly what we're dealing with right now. This Medicaid explosion is Obamacare. It's the foothold for it. You cannot have an effective Obamacare, not to suggest it's going to be a marvelously effective thing, but the guts of it are the Michigan Medicaid that we've just lost the fight in here in Michigan, and that fight's still being waged in a number of states across America. My point is that the Affordable Care Act, its foundation for the indigents that you two are talking about.
Not indigents. Remember, these are folks, this is a new class, all right? I'm not talking to folks who are currently eligible for federal Medicaid. This is not federal Medicaid. This is Michigan Medicaid.
But it's the same thing. It's all part of it.
Well, I understand.
What allows for this is a tenet of the Affordable Care Act. And when I use the word indigent, put your Nancy Pelosi hat on. She thinks that anybody underneath $100,000 a year, wow, is that ugly, folks.
That's a pretty frightening sight.
Take that thing right back off. This is bad.
Yikes.
That was terrible. The point is that these things, one is the same as the other. I read we're Snyder all over the place. This is not Obamacare. It absolutely is Obamacare. You can't have the Michigan Medicaid explosion without Obamacare. That's what it is. It's like saying your hand works wonderful without your fingers. These are the tenets, the fingers of Obamacare. Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's sort of answered. So these people, these 600,000 people who may or may not have their own insurance today, who are going to get free, at least according to their supporters, free health care shortly. They would not, if this Michigan Medicare expansion had not been voted in, they would not be subject to Medicare or to Obamacare as it is supposed to be designed, coming due March 1st of this year, just a month from today.
As I understand it, they'd be still under the old program, which means they could get free service or services through the any hospital that receives state or
they would
federal
not
funding.
But aren't they required? Isn't everyone in the country required, certainly who works, to get insurance of some sort? Isn't that one of the big negatives in Medicare in Obamacare?
I got to tell you, it's hard to ferret out. I think that Nick brought us a picture that shows a stack of the Obamacare.
It's tall, baby.
It's 7 foot 2.5 inches tall. I'm 6'2". This thing's a foot taller than I am, and that's just the bill. It's one page at a time. That all stacks up to 7 foot 2.5 inches. So when you start getting into the particulars here, even the so-called experts start getting a little bit tongue twisted when they get into the intricacies, because frankly, I don't think anybody knows.
There's no possible way anybody's read 20,000 pages of legalese. No individual has read 20,000 pages of legalese between the time that bill was passed and today. And understood
it, yeah.
This thing is the potential for corruption is just enormous. If nobody actually knows what it says, one little expert can going to take one little corner of it and say, see, we're entitled to taxpayers' money for X, Y, and Z. And by the time you're done with this, you're going to have a mess. I firmly believe that the thing is designed to be a mess. It's designed to get us all clamoring for single payer within a couple of years. It's designed to fail. It's designed to make people miserable.
And single payer
right.
Let me just explain what single payer is, at least in one form, which is what everybody used to with great laudatory commentary call Canadian health care, which was single payer. In other words, your health care was provided by the Canadian government.
I always called it Soviet health care.
Well, the people in Canada for many, many years liked it. But about 10 years ago, they started not to like it because they started to experience the long lines, the poor quality of care. Many people forget, but the SARS epidemic, which initially came from, I believe, China, but it exploded in the free world in Toronto, Canada, because people who had this SARS disease or the bacteria within them, they were put in standard Canadian free health care wards. You didn't have the 1 or 2 bedroom or 1 or 2 bed rooms that we mostly have here in the United States. They had wards that had 200 and 300 and 400 people, and that's how the SARS epidemic exploded in North America. And what's happened with that single-payer health care in Canada is that it was against the law for Canadian physicians and Canadian hospitals, if they were so inclined, to provide health care that was not under this Canadian health care auspices. They have since just recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, Canada has voted to change that requirement because Canadian healthcare, single-payer healthcare, is horribly, horribly unpopular, and it's unpopular in every single country where it is currently used. Not to mention, let's forget the cost, not to mention just the pure quality of healthcare that people get.
My aunt lives in northern Canada, and her opinion of the Canadian healthcare system is if you have a cold or the flu, it's a great thing. If you have any kind of serious illness whatsoever, go to the United States. That's her,
right.
That's her opinion of it. She's been
That's
there
right.
since the 50s, and we're endorsing it. But for our Michigan representatives, both Senate and the House, to suggest that this is not part of Obamacare, or that Nick is wrong, because he's exactly right. This is specifically designed to cause the confusion and the angst that it's causing, so that we can transition to that single payer we're talking about right now. One of the things I found fascinating is if you look at things like Tom Casperin, who's the fellow that voted no before he voted yes.
He's a Michigan Republican senator.
From Escanaba, I believe. So it's a kind of a fascinating thing. If you go to his Facebook page and look at, there's about, last I counted, there was about 7, maybe 8 folks up there that were saying, we support you, you did a great thing, thanks for saving the Affordable Care Act in Michigan. But then you start clicking on the people that are complimenting him. One of them was ARP. One of them was from the Michigan Association, Medical Association. One of them was from some other insurance associate. They're all lobbyists, is my point. Everyone I couldn't find any precinct delegates, any voters, any Republican activists that are going, nice job for voting yes after you voted no. I guess when I look at O. Snyder, I'm wondering what he's doing to the Republican Party.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But, Nick, just a question back here. You said you would have voted against, you would have sided with almost all of the Republicans in the Michigan House and in the Michigan Senate. Only 8 Republican senators voted, and they voted with 100% of the Democrats with the support of the SEIU Union, MoveOn.org, all of these leftist organizations. And they're not necessarily evil organizations, but they are advocating for a massive expansion. They were huge supporters of Obamacare initially, and now they are huge supporters of this expansion. Is there anything to change this? Are we doomed? I mean, is this thing going to be cast in stone soon?
I certainly hope not. If the people out there put enough pressure on the representatives in the House, they may back down from it here in Michigan. And even if it passes in Michigan, there's still hope that this will fail at the federal level. And so people need to be contacting their federal representatives all across the country and putting as much pressure on those people to dismantle this.
Well,
mess.
One thing, I would just like to make one quick comment about your showing up here. Now you're 2 weeks in a row on this show, and you're not going to be here for the entire show, but you're standing tall for your view and explaining why it makes no sense. It is, to me, astounding that our elected, full-time paid, a very generous salary, very generous benefits, very generous pension, who's up for re-election, Senator Jeff Hansen, the Republican, will not come on the shows, will not articulate his reasons. He did put a short, and I thought a very poorly crafted letter that MLive published as to why he supported it. Essentially, in one sentence, it's I like to give free stuff to people, and they like to get free stuff. I guess that's 2 sentences. But you're out there articulating it. Our senator is not. That's a little frightening. I know, as Mike said, you communicated with him before this show, and not even the courtesy of a response. It seems to me that when you've got candidates running like yourself, Nick, that sure shows a difference between the candidate and those who believe that they are just going to waltz through another re-election.
Prior to the vote, Mr. Hansen did nothing but equivocate on this particular issue. On the day of the Supreme Court decision, he made a statement that he was disappointed because it was going to hurt Michigan businesses. And on very shortly after that statement, voted on legislation. I want to be careful here, I say the right thing. Voted on legislation to introduce the exchanges in Michigan.
Did he vote for it?
Yes, he voted
Okay.
for the exchange after saying how devastating it would be to Michigan businesses. And then, prior to the vote, the statement that he let out was incomprehensible. It said nothing. 4 or 5 paragraphs of absolutely nothing. And then after the vote, says he's quite proud of himself for helping 10,000 people without any consideration for the taxpayers and Republicans who practically begged him to vote no.
Well, there's one of the things that I keep hearing is that don't worry about this. This is purely extra money that's given to the state of Michigan by the federal government. The federal government will pick up the entire tab for 4 years. And even though the federal government has indicated very strongly that they will end that complete picking up of the tab in 4 years, matter of fact, just this morning on television, Richardson, I believe it was, Senator Richardson was being interviewed, and he said, "Well, we fully expect that that the federal government will continue paying for this. But if the federal government does not, it's pretty clear that the Republicans and the Democrats will have to vote to expand it or to take away this." What we're told is a critically important gift to Michigan citizens and start having to pay for it, and the money isn't there.
What I find fascinating about it, gentlemen, is I genuinely wished that our state legislature and our governor would have been focused on finding ways to build a firewall to stop sending money to the federal government, not wringing their hands and praying about how they might be able to get a couple pittance back, which is what we're talking about in the big picture on this particular thing. But what I find even more fascinating than that is that if you look at the history of Medicaid, and we've touched on it before, I've mentioned before on this show that in 1965, medical expenses were 5% of the average income. Now they're in excess of 35%. The difference is Medicaid. That said, there were more people that had health insurance in 1965 than there are now. So if our government's true agenda here is to provide more health care for more people, then they need to get out of the way and let the people do for themselves like they used to, back when there was more people with better coverage. I don't know how this could possibly be that challenging. Nick, we're getting ready to go to a break. Do me a favor, tell the folks how it is that they can get a hold of you. How can they find you?
The easiest way is to go to Nick for Senate, the number 4, nickforsenate.com, and from there you can link to a Facebook page, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post those there. I'd be delighted to hear from any of you.
That's Nick for Senate on Facebook.
Nickforsenate.com is a website.
Oh, that's a website.
And from there, it's easiest to find the Facebook page.
Okay.
You can click, there's a little banner on the right-hand side of that page.
Nick, thanks for working so hard to let the folks know where you're at on the issues of our times.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to the voters.
We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show. I'm Mike Hewitt, and with me is my most often co-host, Jim Riley.
I am the most oftenest.
Most oftenest. Jim, how about we go rousting rhinos?
We're going to try to roust some rhinos. Rousting is what police used to do. Maybe they don't do it anymore. Maybe they do in some areas. But we're going to go out and look for where the rhinos hang out, and we're going to kind of bop them on the philosophical head and out them as the rhinos they are, which is a rhino, of course, is a Republican in name only. This, to me, is the great plague of the Republican Party, where we elect very nice folks, some of whom have got the business backgrounds and all sorts of reasons why they might be a Republican, but in fact their votes belie that conservative nature. And in fact, they really are Democrats who are conveniently running in Republican areas, and we keep reelecting them time and again.
Do you think Jeff Hansen is a Democrat running as a Republican?
Well, I don't know what's in Jeff Hansen's mind. I do know that if you looked at his votes, if you did not know the political party of Jeff Hansen, you would think that he was a Democrat by looking at the votes. And the reason I say that is there are many what they call voting screens. Vote.com is a website that puts those out. But the Democrats and the liberals in the state of Michigan also have screens that list their favorite candidates, or list all of their elected the senators and Republicans within the state, and rank them on how they vote on Democrat-friendly issues. And Jeff Hansen shows up almost across the board as one of the most favorite Republicans of Democrats in these various screens that screen folks for liberal issues. Now, of course, Jeff does show up as one of the most liberal Democrat or Republicans on many of the screens, or actually on every screen I've seen for Jeff, but also he shows up as one of the most liberal senators on screens that even include Democrats. So, yes, I would say that I don't know what's in his heart. As I said, he's a wonderful guy, but I do know what is in his voting record, and Jeff Hansen votes far too often like a Democrat for anybody to confuse him with a real Republican.
So is it a coincidence that he's got a blue shirt that says Vote Hansen, doesn't say Republican on it?
I found that interesting. Just as Nick was leaving today, he mentioned that. Now, of course, blue is the color of the Democrat Party. Red is the color of the Republican Party. All of this as deemed by the media some years back. But yes, Jeff, when he goes out in parades and public events, he wears a blue shirt, which does not say Republican on it. That is an interesting observation.
One of the things that obviously I've been kicking around to anyone that's following me is the ongoing Medicaid explosion. And what concerns me about it, aside from the huge part of the fact that it passed and we now most certainly have Obamacare or Snydercade, your choice, here in Michigan, but when I look at how it come to pass, that part, when I say roasting Republicans, when I plagiarize you, actually, Jim, when I look at how that
roasting rhinos.
I'm sorry, absolutely.
Plagiarize me correctly.
I'm making note of that.
Here we go.
When I look down how it happened, and I'm looking at 9. Wait, I'm sorry. I was looking at senators. There were 8. I got Senator Coleman Young with the Republicans. I'm sorry, but but they voted the same. Think about that for a minute. Senator Coleman Young Jr. voted with our 8 senators on expanding Medicaid, on advancing Obamacare, which is really how everyone's afraid of saying that, but that's the reality of it. We've advanced Obamacare in the state of Michigan, and our Republicans did it.
Is that the Coleman Young? Is he related to the mayor?
It's Senator Coleman Young Jr. of Detroit.
Oh, my golly, I did not know that.
I have him on my list here. I just got him confused with all the other yes votes.
Oh, my golly, I didn't. Okay, so I would just say it in a different way. I would say that Senator Hansen and 7 Republicans out of some 30-some, only 8, including our Senator Hansen, voted with every single Democrat in the state Senate, including Coleman Young Jr. Wow. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. I just add one other thing. I signed up some years ago to get the MoveOn.org emails, and I got one just this morning, just prior to the show going on. And it starts off, says, Dear Michigan Move On member, great news. After months of pressure, the Michigan legislature has finally passed the bill, blah, blah, blah. They are, of course, giddy. They're doing the Snoopy dance as to how wonderful this is, this expansion of government, this spending all sorts of money with absolutely no mention as to where the money is going to come from. But so our senator not only sides with Coleman Young's son, he sides with MoveOn.org. He sides with the SEIU union.
Nancy
Pelosi. And he sides with virtually every single liberal Democrat or Democrat supporting group in the United States. That's, to me, that is he a rhino? Yeah, it seems to me to be the definition of a rhino.
Absolutely. The other thing I find fascinating when I look at this and I try to put my O. Snyder hat on, and that's a scary hat to twist on, but I try to look at it and say, okay, I'm O. Snyder, and I'm trying to get Obamacare advanced in Michigan. How do I do that? With a Republican-controlled Senate and a Republican-controlled House. How do I advance Obamacare? And then I start looking at the folks that voted yes. And they're either term-limited or they're in districts that probably O. Snyder considered to be very, very safe districts for a hard moderate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what you're suggesting here is, and it makes good politics from Snyder's standpoint. He was all he needed was 8 votes. So he looked at those senators who either were in safe districts or were not up for re-election coming up this just 1 year from now, or at least primary challenges. That made sense. What seems to me to be interesting, at least in terms of where we are here in West Michigan, Senator Hansen is up and does have a primary challenge. But his strategy appears to be to appease and support openly Democrats. In other words, he's looking to win his final term. This will be now his fifth election, his fifth general election, and he's not saying, hey, look, I'm a long-term, solid Republican. I'm going to go out and support Republican issues. He appears, at least on this very, very important issue, to be more interested in reaching out to Democrats, and not just Democrats, to the hardcore left of the Democrat Party, as opposed to us here in the Republican side.
I think it's a little bit different than that. I think he perceives himself as being very safe. I don't believe he thinks he's going to have a viable primary challenger. And by the way, listeners, I am calling for a primary challenge against somebody's got to step up and take him on in the Republican primary.
Now, wait.
Yeah.
Against, you're talking Hansen?
No, Snyder.
Oh, Snyder. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He's standing around patting himself on the back saying, I'm safe, it's okay, I can do what I want to do. I'm the governor.
Yeah, that may be the case.
But I think that's what he's doing. But he also is exposing the Republican majority in both the Senate and the House to losses. He doesn't care about that. Now, and maybe they don't either, and maybe I shouldn't, but I can tell you this. As a long-term grassroots volunteer, the fellow, one of the many that went out and did literature drops and did phone call banks and sent money, as one of the people that did that for the Republican Party, I'm telling you, he's hurting the party, because the next go-around, when some of these people reach out for help, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to start laughing at them when they call my phone number.
Well, you are truly one of the real grassroots activists and volunteers, not just making noise, but actually doing things and organizing other folks to get involved in, as you said, the literature drops and knocking on doors and getting signs up and things of that sort. And I know that you're not alone in that. Yet it isn't good for the party. And again, when an issue, you can agree or disagree with government health care and however it may be designed. But that is one of the few issues that really ought to separate Republicans and Democrats. Democrats have always believed that the government at any level is better off at providing goods and services than the private sector. The Republican Party, on the other hand, says no, we believe the private sector is better for any number of reasons. We think that government inefficiencies, government costs are the worst thing that we can possibly do. And yet here we have in our state a Republican governor, Republican-controlled House and Senate, who have together, the three of them have provided enough votes to support something that ought to be anathema to every single Republican in our state. So I would hope that as you suggested, that we do get a challenger, a Republican conservative challenger to Governor Snyder here. And I would hope that we would see an expansion of these challengers at the state, Senate, and House level also.
I got to tell you, these folks that voted yes, that are not term limited, let them campaign on this vote. That's really how I feel about it.
Yes.
Even in the House, we've got hung up because Casperson did his I voted no before I voted yes nonsense.
Republican Senator Casperson, yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of, so in other words, for the last week or so, the focus has been just on these 8 guys plus Coleman Young Jr. And then
I love that Coleman Young. My good Lord, that's amazing.
But then the reality of it is when I get beyond being choked up with disgust over that nonsense and watching the no vote be so pious that, oh my goodness, yeah, I didn't vote for it. But none of them were up cheerleading saying don't do that. None of the no votes were in there campaigning to say stop this madness. So it was almost like they all got together as a group in the Senate and said, okay, who's vulnerable, who's term limited? Okay, I'm stuck. I drew the short straw. I got to vote no. It's like they sat down and plotted it. Now, but while I'm reeling with disgust over the politics of that,
thank you. I love that.
Yeah. Then I step back and say, wait a minute. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for people in the House of Representatives in the first place. They passed this, and frankly, the House of Representatives.
You mean nationally or the statewide?
Right here in the state.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Often I've looked at the Senate, whether it's national or state, as like the debate club. And the House is where we're supposed to stop this type of socialism from impacting our daily lives. And the truth of it is that that's not what we saw here. We saw Speaker Bolger, however you say this fellow's name, who's term limited, say yes, I'm all over it, smooching on Snyder, getting it passed, and all the way down the list. Hugh Crawford of Novi, Amanda Price of all people. I like Amanda, and I think, what were you thinking, Amanda? You're not a socialist. Why would you do that? And then I can't say the same thing about Joe Haveman, because frankly, this has always been his politics. I've never liked him. Maybe that's why he deleted me from Facebook. The point is that these folks sold us out. So while we're focusing on the 8 plus Coleman Young, we can't let these folks off the hook. They need primary challenges.
Well, one would hope that they would get the support of, and that there are enough interested conservative Republicans to support them. Certainly Nick Sundquist is doing his best. He's got a lot of time now to go get going and bring in that support and articulate his vision. I would just like to add one little comment to one of my all-time favorite authors, Thomas Sowell, who was an eminent economist and also a very prolific writer, author. Here's a quote. "It is amazing that people who think we cannot afford to pay for doctors, hospitals, and medication somehow think that we can afford to pay for doctors, hospitals, medication, and a government bureaucracy to administer it." And therein lies, to me, the biggest question that's unanswered, and that is, on one hand, we're being told that the system that we have now that has no bureaucrats, that these 400 or 600,000 people who are currently getting medical care, now whether you like it or not, they may not have insurance, they have medical care, that in fact they're now going to go into a government bureaucracy that is going to have to sift through fraud and vet everyone. They're going to have to sit with a bureaucrat before they go into the emergency room and all. That all of this bureaucracy that will be added to what they were already getting before, and that in somehow this is going to be better for anybody. One of the things that we do know, politicians love to give away free stuff, and people love to get free stuff. And that is a combination for the destruction of our country.
No question about it. Governor Snyder proposes placing half of any of the short-term savings. He's talking about the Obama money. That's really kind of why we're at this crossroads. Remember, I joked about it here a few weeks ago. I said he's like Minnie Pearl at a half off hat sale.
Yes.
He's got, and that's really what it's all about. He saw $880,000 being dangled in front of him, and he was all of a sudden he was like starry-eyed. He had to get this dough, so he wants to place half of it into a lockbox. I don't know how many government lockboxes you folks have ever heard of, but none exist. Okay. That said, he wants to place half of it in a lockbox to cover future increases in cost. The man knows in advance that this is going to increase in cost.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
He knows it's going up. But here, folks, the difference is he's going to be gone when that happens. Okay, he's going to ride off into the sunset after having advanced Obamacare.
Well, we've got someone here, in Nick Sundquist, and we've got some other very stalwart Republicans who have stood tall and have articulated their reasons, Representative Ray France being another one. It is a lot easier to give away other people's money than it is to articulate the reasons why you're not going to do so. This is critical. This is so important. As you just pointed out, Governor Snyder knows this is a Ponzi scheme. He knows it can't work financially. He wants to benefit politically from all the kudos he's going to get from the liberal media, which we know, from all the kumbayas he's going to get from the Democrats and the government employee unions, and then he'll retire.
You ever notice that all these extraordinarily rich leftists, including Snyder, always want to give somebody else's money away rather than their own? Folks, we're going to go to a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Mike Hewitt and Jim Riley on the Renegade River Show. Jim?
And I am here, yeah.
Welcome back.
I didn't leave. There was a I was tempted. It's a beautiful Sunday out here. Big Labor Day weekend.
It's supposed to be thunderstorms.
Well, you know what? Every once in a while I've noticed that the weatherman is not precise.
No,
I have noticed that.
That's a little bit like saying this government program is going to get better if we wait.
There we go, yeah. Or just a little more money and we'll fix it. Honey Bunch is constantly reminding me of the weatherman's lack of specificity. Hey, I got just one little thing. It has nothing to do with our conversation, but it does have to do with a business here in Muskegon County. My import center, Honey Bunch, just bought a new vehicle. And we were treated, I believe, extremely well, very professionally by the good folks. Of course, Dr. Mark Campbell and his son are the owners of My Auto Import Center. They employ many people. They pay, I'm sure, they make a profit, so they pay taxes on those profits. They pay, of course, all of the insurance and things of that sort for their employees. And they provide, I think, a very, very good service. And it's a car dealership. Of course, they repair the vehicles, but We did a lot of research in terms of price, and we were very, very well served by those folks. And I would just like to say not surprisingly, we do have a very, very fine car dealership here in our own community. So good for them, and thanks for the great service.
Very nice. Can we go back now?
Yeah, I know. God, where do we go from here? Well, hey, it's your show, big guy. I'm just your Ed McMahon here.
Wow.
You are so smart.
There you go. According to the Heritage Foundation, how you like that?
I love
Doesn't
them.
that sound smart when you start that way?
Yes, it makes everybody sound smart.
Oh, yeah. According to the Heritage Foundation, Medicaid will impose a $1.3 billion in net costs on Michigan taxpayers between now and 2022.
Well, it will either do that on taxpayers, or it will more likely be somehow borrowed. Again, our governor in the state of Michigan has repeated his threat, I guess you'd have to call it a threat or a promise, that the state does not have enough money, it is not taking in enough taxes from the rest of us to repair the roads. So if we're going to involve the state government that has so apparently ineptly managed that it cannot even repair the roads, which ought to be really right at the top, and it doesn't have enough money to repair those roads, we got a problem. And when you add more expenses without bringing in more revenue, of course, we all know the result of that is bankruptcy.
No question about it. Listen, I got to tell you, I'm a Republican. Make no mistake about it as I say the things I'm going to say. I've been a Republican all my life, been a Republican candidate. But I've got a lot of friends that are either libertarians or some Constitutional Party members, some independents, and they all tell me over and over again, Mike, there's no difference between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party.
I've heard that many, many times.
I've heard it a million times.
Yep.
And right now, as we talk, I'm looking at a picture of Jennifer Granholm, and she's sitting beside Hillary Clinton and some other lady I don't recognize. And over the top of Jennifer Granholm's head is a sign that says, Medicaid, strengthening our health care safety. And when I look at this, I reflect back to all of the grassroots folks in the Republican Party I met while campaigning for O. Snyder to make sure that we had our Republican so that we didn't have another Jennifer Granholm in the office. And folks, we got another Jennifer Granholm in the office. And I hear a lot of, oh, Mike, no, he's done a lot of good. No, he hasn't. He's been forced to do a handful of good things because for quite a while we had a state house and a state senate that did some good things. And he was forced along no different than Bill Clinton was when Gingrich was the Gingrich Revolution. Bill didn't want to sign all of those reforms. He was stuck doing it. And that's kind of what it's been up until this Medicaid explosion for O. Snyder. At any rate, this picture, I just found this just kind of a revelation to see her touting the exact same thing that our Republican fella, I laugh at the media, they call him a Tea Party candidate. He's as far removed from a Tea Party candidate as anyone could possibly get.
You mean Governor Snyder?
Yes, sir.
Well, of course, Governor Snyder was not supported by the Tea Party.
But the media says that they beat it like an old wore-out drum.
And I think that's just, again, another example of why we should be very skeptical about what we do here in the media, because you and I are essentially Tea Party-style Republicans. We did not support, nor did we vote for Governor Snyder in the primary. And again, so often the media will absolutely lie about simple facts, facts that are easily proven, but they get away with it because in many cases, many people don't care. And certainly if they are outed, what media is out there aside from shows like yours to tell the people the truth?
I got to tell you, but there are a lot of voices like mine across Michigan.
Yes, there are.
That are saying, "What are we thinking?" And let me while I'm bashing on some of our party folks, I also look to Dave Agerman, who I like a lot as a person. He's been a guest on this show, but he's our national committee man. And so I say, Dave, where are you at on this? Where have you been for the last 60 days throughout this? We've got Terry Linland, who's our committee woman to the RNC, who's also a senatorial candidate. And I'm saying, wait a minute, where are the big voices in the Republican Party to say, wait, that's not republicanism, that's not limited government, that's not liberty or freedom. Going from 5% of health care costs aiming at 40 is not providing more people health care. Where are these voices on those topics?
Well, it would help if more folks like you would put our elected officials, remember, they're in theory, they are supposed to work for us, put them under the gun to respond and put them under the gun to tell us specifically what they stand for. I mean, we do know quite clearly, unfortunately, what Jeff Hansen stands for. One thing I'd just like to add to what you said here is that those people, those caring, productive Americans who are so frustrated with the fact that Republicans and Democrats so often seem to be identical, and in fact, as we're just explaining right now, in fact, in many cases, that is true. We get the politicians we vote for, all right? The opportunity to change things, to in fact make the Republican a different choice from the Democrat is almost entirely tied up and done on primary day. And in the state of Michigan, our primary is next August. We will continue to get the panderers, those people who are reveling and wonderfully successful at giving away other people's money, as long as we continue to vote for them. And I would just recommend that anybody, be it county commission, or we've got, of course, elections coming up here in Muskegon County in November, do your homework. If you believe more government, more spending, and of course the resulting more borrowing and worse services, as we know from highways and others, will be the result, go ahead and do it. But if you're going to put your head in the sand, you're going to continue to get what we get. If we reelect Jeff Hansen after his record, we will deserve the kind of government we're going to get.
I think that's exactly right. But I got to tell you, I think we need to drill a little bit deeper. I've been told by a couple different people that voted no in the Senate. I said, how come this came back up for a revote after it was rejected? And the answer was, well, almost all bills that are rejected come back up for a vote. And you know what the truth of it is while it's not an anomaly, it's not some freak of nature that a bill may be presented again, it happens less than 25% of the time. And you say, now, wait a minute. So these guys sat down in a little cloakroom somewhere and said, who's weak? They look at Casperson, who voted yes on right to work, or voted against right to work, and didn't get overtly attacked. So now we got a guy that is pliable, that must be savable after such a silly vote. I just think that it was all coerced. It's one thing just to pick the guys that said yes, but to forgive the guys that said that voted no and didn't campaign to try to get more no votes, that to me is almost as bad, maybe even worse. What was that Jack McHugh said about the folks that voted no?
I don't know.
Jack McHugh basically said that maybe we should have more. Was it respect? I can't remember the word he used.
They were at least honest in their vote. Yeah.
Exactly.
In other words, voted yes. You mean? In other words, the Hansens and the rest of them, at least those who voted yes, stood tall and were willing to take the heat. As opposed to perhaps some of those Republicans who were allowed to vote no, but in fact really in their hearts supported this expansion. Well, again, I'm not going to tell you what's in the hearts of anyone, because none of us know. We do know what's in their votes. And we do know that far too many of our Republicans vote just like Democrats. Too many of our elected Republicans are the favorites of the Democrat Party, of the unions, and those special interests. We keep getting what we deserve, folks.
You like term limits, don't you?
I very much do.
And the irony of this is that I thoroughly believe that term limits are exactly why we have the tenets of Obamacare here in our state government now, because everyone on this list, or almost everyone on this list, are folks that are term limited, and that's who Snyder pointed at to say, I need a yes out of you because you can't get hurt. I need a yes out of you because you can't get hurt. That's what he used as a criteria, and that's the mess we're in right now.
That's the downside of term limits.
And the other side of it is, I don't know if you ever met the bureaucratic machine in Lansing. If you, as a state legislator, they've got just it is laughable, a monolith of lawyers and bean counters and bureaucrats that they gather them in a little conference room and present the government position on these things, and they're pretty convincing. So some of these folks are probably honest folks, but they've had their head shrunk by these bureaucrat types that of course They need big government to exist. That's their business line.
Many of them have that within their souls.
I find it just utterly, absolutely disgusting. That's what I find it. And so I'm not going to not campaign as hard as I have been, but I'm going to campaign very, very heavy in the primary for good, viable candidates against these people.
I hope they are brave enough and are able to succeed.
You're going to join me, Jim? In that
Absolutely,
effort?
absolutely.
Oscar, how about you?
Oscar says yes. He throws his arms up and says yes.
Oscar's in.
Yeah, there he is.
Very nice. Jim, you going to be back next week?
Well, if I'm invited, sure.
Very nice. Folks, we will be talking to you next Sunday at noon to 1. Thank you very, very much for listening today.